So let's jump in. We have our first question coming in. Who are you voting for this November? No, just kidding about that question. Don't want to freak you out too much, right? So let's see. All right, this one comes from, let's see, it's been voted all the way to the top. It's from Jason Hinline, I'm getting that down correctly. As a community, what topic are we not giving enough attention to in order to help organizations be successful? So what's the topic we are not giving enough attention to in order to help organizations be successful? Kind of broad. Not everybody at once.
So how do you want us to?
By the way, if no one raises their hand, I just
raise our hand.
Yeah, just raise your hand. That way I can identify. Mike, you have something to say. Go for it, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the topic of my talk, right? You know, I'm a big believer in transformation strategy, and like very disciplined ways of making these kinds of changes isn't talked about enough. I think we need to talk about the role of organizational structure and organizational design on our ability to actually execute agile practices. Because to me, it's like you can do the best Scrum in the whole world, but if you can't form complete cross-functional teams, it doesn't really work very well. So.
All right. Oh, I see Danny, Mr. Danny Preston. Okay. It's a lot of people to keep up with. Sorry, Danny.
Right. Yeah. The other thing, so every org that I work with, you know, there's always, you know, Scrum Masters, release managers, people like that say, man, this is not an agile culture. There's blockers in our ability to actually execute the core agile principles. And so I think a key thing is getting those feedback loops, engaging leadership in that discussion, and having forums, things like that, where you can kind of listen and learn from each other in the org. But again, you know, I think we all know the people that are closest to the work have some of the best knowledge about what the blockers are and maybe best ways of getting it done. And so creating those feedback loops is critical as well. I think we could definitely spend more time on that.
Yes. Okay. Miss Kimberly Dornish.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with everything that was said already.
You're up, Kimberly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I agree with everything that's been said already. I also find that I'm working a lot with executives on the topic of getting them to realize the changes they have to make and how they lead and how they manage, and allowing enough time to talk about how we work rather than just the widgets that get produced. And that takes a lot to get them to recognize that their role is really now about creating the environment and creating the space and the time for folks to learn a new way to work.
Yes, I think it's, if I may just go ahead, it's dispelling the myth.
All right, Marguerite.
Okay, thank you. It's dispelling the myth that this is an IT or an engineering problem to solve. I think that was the grassroots start of many transformation, and is still the engine behind a good bit of the work being done to advance agility. However, this notion that it's an IT thing is just such a misunderstanding, that anything we can do to help people understand that it is an enterprise thing, it's a finance thing, it's an HR thing, it's the whole organization that needs to understand. So I think that theme, I heard it, Mike say it, Kimberly say it, but the more we can do to divorce digital transformation or agility from IT only, I think will advance all of our causes.
All right, Mr. Russell Miller. I'm hearing that there's a lag, so sorry about that.
Not a problem. I would agree with several of the comments. I think most all of the comments that were made here. Another thing that I have observed, and there's a funny saying that I'd like to share with you. It's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that just ain't so that hurts you. And so when I train folks, I hear a lot of, well, we do this, or where I work, we do this, and they're dysfunctional practices, but sadly the person espousing the view doesn't appreciate how they're dysfunctional. And so at the risk of sounding a bit self-serving, I think that we often overlook the necessity for people getting some decent training before they embark on new ways of working. And I see it over and over and over again. We understand technical practices training, why it's necessary that you understand how to use a new framework or a new piece of software, but sometimes there are other people relationships training and other things that we overlook at great cost to our customers and to our products.
All right, cool. This one seems to be big. Oh, we've got Mr. Doc Norton. You have to come off of mute, but you got it.
Yep, I'm off mute. So I agree with a lot of what's being said here, and I don't want to, a panel that violently plus ones each other becomes pretty boring. This element, this idea of it's not just IT. I agree with that. It's not just IT, but it certainly is IT. And when I look at a lot of organizations, I see organizations doing a better job of thinking about the broader implications. How do we really reorient around product? How do we change the way that we fund? What does leadership need to look like? And when I look at a lot of these, what I actually see happening, and maybe it's just because of where I kind of sit in organizations a lot, at the actual technical end of things, there isn't any attention, or there's very little attention to actually what needs to happen to enable agility. There's a lot of move fast, make more code, but there's very little attention to good compositional design and really good considerations, TDD, et cetera. And I feel like everything else is almost concentric circles out from that. If we're actually not able to build it well and fast, improving the rest of the system is helpful, but the bottleneck is at the ability to actually deliver.
I think they knew what they were talking about when they wrote the Agile Manifesto, right? Because the continuous attention to technical excellence in design enhances agility. It's right there, here.
All right, Mr. Pullen.
So I think the thing that we're not talking about as a community enough is, when is transformation not appropriate? Sometimes we get transformation happy and we start talking about it as if it's the new pixie dust, and versus just the hard work. And transformation is hard work, but where it's not transforming the organization that's necessarily the thing that's going to move the needle. And Mike touched on that. It's not always just implementing Scrum or something else. It may be that transformation isn't necessarily the thing you need to really be competitive.
All right, good stuff. So let's move on to the next question, and you'll feel and hopefully I'm coming through a little bit better now. What is one piece of advice, this comes from Richard Harris, you would give someone that is having trouble breaking into the Agile/Scrum field, i.e. so many jobs are geared towards those with X years experience or requiring specific certification? What advice would you give the new person that's trying to break in? Go for it, Russell.
I would look at your current skill set and figure out how you might be able to contribute even in the smallest possible way. And then once you're able to contribute on, say, a development team in some way, then your foot is in the door and you can more easily transition to the role that you would prefer to play.
Francis.
Sure. So this is one of the things that in my capacity as a hiring manager, I've looked for as well. One of the questions that I get asked is the same sort of thing, but from a development perspective. How do I, as a junior developer, actually get a job in development? You know, so I've been through a coding boot camp. I know the basics of development, but I don't know anything about enterprise development. How do I fix that? And one of the things that I look for when I'm making those kind of hiring decisions isn't necessarily experience, but passion and commitment. So one of the ways that I think that people can express that well is to work with an open source project on the side. So I say that obviously from a development perspective, but I think that that's actually also useful from an agile perspective. You know, maybe as a scrum master, maybe acting as product owner to an existing open source project. They might not always acknowledge that they need those kind of people on those projects, but they do. It's no different to any other form of development practices. So find some kind of open source project that you're interested in, do it alongside your main job for a little while, show that passion and commitment so that when you come to actually look for a role as a Scrum Master, you can say, I haven't done this in a commercial environment, but here's what I have done. I have been building up this experience, and that's why you should hire me for this.
Mr. Kottmeyer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it falls in the category of like not really any easy answers, right? It's like if you're an entry level person, like you know, relevant schooling, domain expert, or like certifications and things like that can help. But I think the problem is a lot of times you just need to have experience, and you know, again, it's the conundrum: you don't have experience, so you can't get it. You can't get it because you don't have it. But I would say is find something where experience isn't as important, and then leverage the skills that you have and that you want to develop in that role. Like what comes to mind is like if you're a project manager, like you can get an entry level project manager spot and then start trying to influence and do some agile stuff in that spot. And if I was hiring like an engagement analyst or somebody into my team who was more junior, I might see, well, they've got really solid project management experience and they've learned how to apply some things into a more traditional context, and they deeply understand the concepts and can explain to me like what they would do if they had full agency to do something. Like I might be inclined to give that kind of a person a shot, even if they hadn't specifically done what it was that I was trying to do. It's like relevant skills and experience, desire to learn, knowledge of the space, and willingness to push the boundaries where they're at today. A lot of the problems with more senior people is that they want to move into something like the agile space, but they're comped at a level that it's justified where they're at, but that comp level isn't justified in the new space. I think that might be like a harder problem to solve. And then it's almost like the same kind of deal. You got to almost make a lateral move and then start making change and developing skills at your level, current level of pay. Right. So they're tough problems, but I think it's a little bit like what Francis said in a different context. At some point in time, you got to put the work in outside of your day job to develop skills. I wanted to be an agile coach. And so I started blogging and writing and educating myself and doing as much as I could. And nobody really ever gave me a job as an agile coach. I just created the space to do it myself. You know, so you got to like take it by the horns and teach yourself, right? That's what it comes down to.
You took the job. Okay, Kimberly.
And I guess to build on top of that, I would say use your network, right? So if you have strong connections and they know you from a previous life, a previous role, they might be willing, and if they have the need, they might be willing to take that chance on you, knowing that you're still learning and still developing that skill set, but they know you're passionate, you're hardworking, you've delivered in the past. And from personal experience, when I started my own business and working on my own, I went back to my network and I said, here's what I'm about to do, and I'm doing things a little different. support me, give me something, throw me a bone type of thing. And a lot of people got me started from that, saying, yeah, we know your work from previous roles. We're willing to give you a shot.
Cool.
So
So before we come to you, Matt, I just want to point out, I kind of feel like we're all the Brady bunch, and we're like, you're the dad, right? So, Mr. Bashley, take us away.
Well, Kimberly's right there next to me. So, so I was going to add on to what Kimberly just said, as like the doc said, it makes it fun to +1 each other. But no, I would just add what I was wanting to say is, what I've seen recently, a lot of people getting excluded because of the filters, the checkbox filters that, you know, when you apply for a job, you get excluded because you don't have certification, or you don't have the user experience. So that's where you need your network, and also, you know, use there's tons of resources online, or places online to go look and try to identify a smaller business. Look for a smaller company that aren't going to use those filters. Because a lot of the big companies, they filter you out just because, like, hey, we want a Scrum Master with 3 years experience and these 6 certifications, and like, come on, that's ridiculous. No one will even, you know, for an entry level. And I was like, come on, that's not fair. So
that's a good point, Mr. Solomon.
Yeah, so there's a corollary to what Matt was just saying, which is that this is one of the reasons that when I'm looking for a new position, and I'm not looking for a new position, by the way, that will be crazy right now. But when I am looking for a new position, I don't ever do a direct apply. Like, you won't find my resume out on any of those resume sites. I won't go and directly apply to a company. I'm always working with a recruiter, someone who already has an in at the company, someone who can say, hey, that Francis guy, he may not have exactly the skill set you're looking for here, but this is why he'd still be an awesome fit. So finding someone else who can advocate for you to get into that role is super helpful. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a recruiter. That could be a referral, someone you already know, someone who's already a contact who you can leverage to help catapult you into that role. The power of people, the power of connections, the power of word of mouth really, really helps. Like, never forget that. Network as much as you can. I know that's hard right now, but virtual networking, be involved in virtual meetups if you can. Do things like this, connect with everyone, even if they can't help you right now. Connect now, build long-term relationships, and then by the time you do need something or can offer something to them, you've already built that and you don't have to go scrambling around. So yeah, build your relationships and leverage them.
Okay. I'm going to throw us a curveball real quick and point. I'm going to go off of video. Maybe that'll be a little bit better. There we go. And this came in through our channel, but I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. In the wake of what we've now learned from COVID-19, how have you seen organizations what have you seen that they could do? What have you seen that it emerged that they couldn't do that made something now more important or more relevant? What is it that you're seeing that COVID-19, what's the impact been on of emerging impediments or things that they now need to address? All right, I've got a lot of hand waves up here. Let's go with Doc down there. Then I'll go. I think I saw Mike and Francis. So sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'm not. I don't know if this directly answers it. Something that I've noticed. I have a very large client that I'm working with. Tim spent some time there, with me in the last year or so. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that they very, very strongly held to the perspective that bodies had to be in offices And we as an industry for a long time have really advocated for co-located teams. And I think that there was a time when the technology did not allow for collaboration beyond face-to-face. And the technology has actually gotten much better. And what this organization is now starting to really realize is that there's a great number of teams that do not need to be in the office, and not only are as capable, to a great extent, they're more capable because they're not experiencing the kind of disruption that they were once experiencing. They're not experiencing a lot of the kind of obligatory meetings and et cetera. That effectiveness has actually gone up for some of these teams. So I think at least to that extent. It's really it's changing a perspective around what does it mean to be on a team, and what does it mean to be collaborative. So I think it's had a positive impact in that regard.
Fascinating. Mr. Kottmeyer, then we'll go to Francis after that.
So it's going to be interesting, right? Building on what Doc said, and this isn't even a +1, but I'm building on the point. It's like, it is true. Like everything Doc said is 100% true, but it's like, I'm interested to see if it sticks, right? If in 3 to 6 months when this is all done, because I know that like, at least for some of our teams, like doing remote coaching, it's exhausting, right? It's like, in some ways it's harder than being in the room because you're constantly virtual and you don't have the release of going to lunch, and you don't have all the other social interactions that soften some of the harder business interactions. And so I don't think it's going to stay the way it's going to stay. I think it might soften it and make it more flexible. Like you can be at home some, but I think people are going to want to come back together. That's my gut, but we'll see. One of the things I think, getting to kind of my take on the question, one of the things I think it's putting pressure on some, and I see this in the coaching community a bit. I think it's harder to be and I hope I'm not being provocative, but harder to be like a back of the room, kind of touchy-feely, kind of humanistic coach in this time, because so much of that is about being in the room and connection and counseling and things like that. So I'm seeing a lot of people in the industry struggle to stay busy. Not everybody, but a lot of people struggle to stay busy. And one of the things, and again, I certainly have a bias towards this, right? So you guys just discount me if you think I'm being self-serving. I'm not trying to be, but it's like, I think metrics-driven transformation, metrics-driven coaching, where you can actually see really demonstrable, value-driven outcomes of the transformation, is something that if we want to be persistent as a community, assuming that we are continuing to be remote, I think companies are going to expect some hard value out of us moving into the future. It's my take. Doc wants to counterpoint me.
No, not a counterpoint. I'm with you. One, I don't think it's a permanent thing, and two, I think that I hope and I think that a movement towards you said a metrics driven coaching and transformation. I'm seeing that anyway, maybe in a healthy way in organizations where, it isn't just, I think one of the challenges in the past is that coaches come in, they join a team, they just sort of become a team member, and stuff is moving, and maybe it's getting better, or maybe it's not. And now, we're starting to look at, all right, how can we actually, set plans for what's next, actually, move towards those outcomes. So I've been kind of seeing that happening anyway. And I think I'm with you, Mike. I think it's being accelerated by the current environment. So my hope is just that it's being done well, because it would be easy to fall into a very, numbers goal push thing. And I don't think that's healthy.
Totally agree.
Awesome. Francis, you had something on this one as well, and then we have a question in Q&A.
Sure. So a couple of things there. So I'm coming at this more from an engineering perspective rather than a coaching perspective, the way you guys are. I think that one of the reasons that our virtual team works well is because we already all knew each other before all of this lockdown stuff came down on us. And so we have that sense of comfort with each other that means we can still joke around without worrying about, oh, do I know this person well enough to pull off that kind of a joke and things like that. If we were to change out several members in the team for people that we didn't know, maybe they were new to the organization or something like that, I would have concerns about whether we could be so effective without actually having had that face-to-face bonding time beforehand. That said, some of that comes from my own prejudice, where I vastly prefer being face-to-face with people. So I don't know, that concern may not be shared by other members of my team. I'm not sure. The other point that I wanted to make, which is slightly different from what we've talked about so far, in terms of coordinating, one of the other things that we've noticed is that a lot more of our communications tend to be asynchronous when we're on lockdown. And so I can't just wander over to someone's desk anymore and say, hey, can you help me with such and such? No, sure, I can give them a quick Zoom call or a quick Slack call or something like that and ask them to help me out. But more often than not, I'm sending them a Slack message. So we have these asynchronous communications mediums, and that means that things that could or should happen quickly tend to be a little more delayed. And so to go back to the original question, like, what are we lacking in organizations? It's more automation. I touched on this a little bit in my talk when I said that one of the things that we want to do moving forward from where we are now is a lot more infrastructure as code. So I don't want to have to reach out to my SRE team and say, hey, can you provision me such and such? Can you do this? I don't want to have to reach out to the network team and say, hey, I need a DNS entry set up for this. I want to be able to roll it out just with scripts so that I don't have to bother them. They already know that this stuff works, and that assuming we're doing something sensible, we don't have to involve them at all. So that's something that we're trying to move towards, but it's a slow process, and it's one of those things that's become more apparent during this lockdown that we do actually need to happen. So we're definitely driving in that direction, as much automation as possible.
Awesome. Ed, did I see your hand up as well?
You did, and this actually may answer
Danny.
yet another one
Okay.
inside of the Slack that has to do with stand-ups, because I'll take what Mike and Doc said and drill down even a little bit more on the micro level. I 100% support what they said, but for me, it's a communication breakdown, like Francis was just saying. We're not face-to-face, so we're losing some of that. And so one of the tools we're using very, very effectively is we're going back to all work must be broken down into tasks. And our running joke is, you know, Scrum's telling me to, or teaching me to tell smaller lies. In the old days, I used to tell whoppers, right? Yeah, we'll be done in a year. Now the biggest lie you can tell on my team is 2 days, because if Ed, Danny, Kimberly, and Doc are on a team, we break the task and we together estimate that task. And when I come back to my daily stand-up, what I'm really doing is putting it back in their face and saying, I couldn't get this done in a day. Can you? We all said it was a day. And then we talk about why or why not. Do I need skill training, or do I need help, or do they sit with me, or they all look at me and go, no, we all misestimated it, right? But it is just I'm just finding the daily tasks are so important because of the communication breakdown and the Slack and all that.
Yeah. I think where I've seen kind of where Francis was at, where I've seen teams already formed working together, that's been really well and not disruptive, heck, maybe even more productive. But I typically work with, a variety of different companies out there, and I have yet to kick off a brand new transformation since COVID hit. And it seems like every company is like, hey, we really want to do this. It sounds cool. We're convinced you can help us, but now's not the time for one reason or another. Budget issues. Everybody's just slammed trying to do more with less people, all that. So I do think there's some serious challenges there. If this extends, beyond another 3 or 6 months or something like that, we're going to have to figure that out and get good at that. And the other thing that I think is just ripe for improvement is training. It seems like most of the 2-day classes that a lot of us do, the digital equivalent of that is listen to me on Zoom for 2 days and hope you don't fall asleep. And that's just a terrible way to learn. I don't think there's a lot of retention in that. Definitely needs to be rethought if this were to be something that stays for a while. In the classroom, there's just a dynamic there that I don't think many people are able to replicate on a video call. So that would be something that needs to be rethought.
All right. So we're gonna switch it up again here and go to our Q&A. So thank you for the Q&A question over here, Nat. I'm gonna rephrase this one slightly too, but let me know if I get it wrong. What are some techniques to avoid burnout? I'm sure no one on this panel has experienced the 2 to 3 p.m. burnout that occurs, but yet we're always on, right? So things didn't change magically. It's almost like it got more intense. Like no one wants to lose business. No one wants to lose the ball. And yet there seems to be this pattern across our culture, our country of, okay, 2 to 3 o'clock, I am spent and I'm always on. So do you have any recommendations for how to battle that? Russell's is to move off screen. I see. I'm just playing with you, Russell. But yeah, who's got this one? Yes, Marguerite.
I think we all know about taking breaks, getting exercise, and eating well. Of course, all of that. But I think keeping a nice mix of the type of work that you're doing, just being here at this conference is a wonderful break for me from my normal focus with clients. Occasionally making time to write. This all advances our professional, growth, but having a good mix, I think, is important in trying to keep that balance against burnout.
Miss Dornish, Kimberly, let's go over there, and then we'll come to you, Jerry.
Building on what Marguerite said, I find that, especially working from home, I find that a lot of my clients don't know how to switch off, right? They wake up, they get on. They're working until all hours of the night. The computer is always there and it's always on. And one of the things that I had suggested to them is to reintroduce the habit of going to work and coming home from work and your commute. So at the beginning of the day, open your laptop, boot it up, just like you would if you had come into the office, right? And when you leave, when you want to stop your workday, close your laptop, put it in a bag, take a walk to resemble your commute. Create those markers at the beginning and the end of the day so you're not always working. And that's what I'm finding. My clients are starting to burn out because they don't know how to separate work and their life when it's happening almost literally in the same room in their homes. So I find
Awesome.
that has helped with them. And it sounds a little hokey, but I said, if you could do that, then you're less tempted to reopen the laptop, reboot up again to check. You'll go back to your normal habits of when you used to do a commute.
Awesome. Yeah, Jerry, let's go to you.
Yeah, I would. Yes, thank you. I would add to that. So I've been talking with a lot of executives, and I'm really talking to leaders when I talk about this. Is that you all have vacation time, and you are setting the pace. If you do not take vacation time, you are saying, "Well, yes, please go ahead, but I may be sitting over here and judging you." So I've worked with a lot of executives, and they kept saying, "Oh, I'm making my people take time off," and I keep asking them, "What are you doing? What time are you taking off?" And so finally, a lot of them have finally realized if they're not doing that, then they're sending a mixed message when they keep expecting their people to take time off. I think using the vacation time is really, really important right now. And then if I'm going to throw in a little bit about OKRs, I'm going to say that everybody should be working on the priority work, not the busy work, but the priority work and understanding why they're doing what they're doing. So it really feels that they're making progress as opposed to simply staying busy from the moment, as Kimberly says, the moment they get up in the morning until they go to bed at night. So it's got to be boundaries, and you've got to take the time off, because otherwise you're going to get burned out and you're not going to be good for yourself or the company.
Awesome. And Jeremy.
This may be surprising. Turn off video. you don't sit all day looking everybody else in the eye. There's a level of social connectedness that you get from that, but there's also a level of attention and burnout that you get from it. And so in some of your online working sessions, just turn off video. When you need high interactivity, turn it on and use that as a way to, even if you are having to stay connected, um, use it as a way to not just sap your mental energy.
Yeah, to add to that
Francis,
real quick.
one more. We'll have two more answers to this, and we'll move on to the next one. Francis, and then we'll do Mike on it. Okay.
Sure. Just building real quick on what Jeremy said. It's actually relatively unusual for me to turn on Zoom video while I'm at work. I will turn it on when I'm conducting one-on-ones. But apart from that, I generally have it turned off because the video isn't really an important part of the meeting. It's just a distraction. So simple as that.
All right, Mike.
I was just going to add one thing that I personally do. It's just building on the same theme everybody's talking about. But like I get up and we have a pretty early start to our day. So I have a couple hours in front of my team. And then I literally break for a couple hours in the morning and literally leave the house, go exercise. I have like a whole routine that I do where I'm totally off, totally doing self-care stuff. And then like I come back and it's lunch. Sometimes it's with people, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's on a screen, sometimes it's not. Then I have a certain amount of time to work in the afternoon, break. And so like what I've done is I've structured my day into chunks and done an explicit change of scenery and an explicit change of activity as I go from different parts of the day. And so usually if I do my day well, I'll get to 5 or 6 at night and I'm like not a total basket case and not totally worn out. It happens sometimes. But I think that structure and that change of scenery is a big deal to me.
Awesome. Yeah, great answers, panel. Here's one from our closing panel Slack channel. So Doc in his session, in his keynote, talked about invitation. Someone talk about a time when they knew it was time to move on from a leader and executive after extending multiple invitations. Yep. Let's go, Mike. That's one I saw. Okay.
I'm going to take invitation from a slightly different angle, right? If you're a coach on the ground, you absolutely have to invite to participate, and you can't, and obviously you can't do anything to anybody that doesn't want it done to them. But at the same time, I think there's I don't know how I want to say this, but like an obligation to be influential and to help them see. And so sometimes as Agile coaches, we speak from our frame of reference rather than from their frame of reference. What's in it for me or for the team versus what's in it for that leader and how it's going to help make their life or their organization better. So I agree that there's an invitation and that you have to let people walk away, but I think we have to get better at really communicating the value prop for that executive and why they should really consider doing this. From the leader's point of view, sometimes people talk about inviting the team or empowering the team to decide. There's no universe in the world where I would run a company that wasn't delivering iteratively and incrementally and held accountable in small batches and able to measure progress and all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to distinguish between, like, I don't want to mandate a practice, but the principles I think are non-negotiable. So I dance on that a little bit. So like in my organization, like you don't get to deliver in big batches, right? You just don't get to, right? That's just not how we work. Now, do I mandate Scrum? Like, no, right? I don't care, right? But weekly progress against measurable goals and tangible deliverables that we can touch and feel, like absolutely, right? That's not an invitation. That's just the way we work. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, that's space creation.
Right, we've got multiple people here, so I'm going to go to Danny, then we'll come up to Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks. And I would say, like, on one hand, part of me says you can never give up on someone. Somebody always can change. There can always be some way in. And if you get in their headspace enough, you can help them see while you're looking towards the same goals. You're just maybe approaching it different ways, and you could experiment that. On the other hand, they're probably in your life, you've got things you're prioritizing. You can't spend 100% of your time with everybody. Like at some point you've got to make a decision. And that's where I kind of separate the kind of front burner and back burner stuff. And so just an example, I think you were asking for like a time. I was working with one leader. He had kind of spun up this company, very successful founder kind of guy. And he was doing some things, saying some stuff like, that was very destructive to the culture there, like calling people out in big groups and just all kinds of stuff like that. And I pulled him aside and I was like, hey, you can't be that way as a leader. Like you're killing the culture. And his response was, look, I never said I was a leader. I hire leaders. I'm not pretending to be a leader. And I was like, all right. To me, mentally, I kind of made the check there. I was like, okay, we're probably not going to get along all that great because like whether you say you are or not, you're leading people. And so while I could probably spend a whole lot of time convincing you to turn over that leaf in life, he's a successful dude, hard-headed, and it's probably not going to be worth my time to spend a lot in that area. So I'll go focus on someone else. And keep him backburner. Now we still stay in touch. I'm still there, but it's not like I'm spending 40 hours a week with him. So I think that's it's probably just a prioritization decision, given your available options. How much time do you spend with the various people in your spheres of influence?
Right. So for me, it's really two key things. One is, are they engaged? If they're not making it to meetings, they're not answering phone calls, then that's an obvious sign. But the other is, are they willing to make commitments to themselves and then at least make an effort to keep them? And you can't change anyone. Really, the role of a coach is to help them come up with what they want to change. And if they're not willing to commit to you and themselves about what they'll do differently and be accountable to you about following up on that, then it really just turns into a friendly conversation that doesn't go anywhere.
Cool. So we're going to go to Doc, and then this will be our last one before our final question of the panel. So Doc, go ahead.
So I think it's a little interesting, the story that I have. So at a time where maybe I decided to leave an organization after extending multiple invitations to a leader, right? So I'm working with this organization where I'm actually employed there, and a very agile focused organization, but having some challenges with one of the owners in particular. And a lot of the behaviors that kind of Danny kind of alluded to in that with this particular individual. And I'd spent a good amount of time pulling him aside, one-on-one kind of stuff, just kind of saying, hey, these are the values of the organization. These are the things we're doing. And one of the things that he'd been known to do was to basically pull a group together, have them have a discussion, come to a decision. And then if he didn't like the group decision, just overrule it. But not tell them he was going to. He would just act differently later. And this came up a couple of times, one-on-one, and then it actually came up in a group session. And he got very upset. And he said, look, I'm a servant leader. And as a servant leader, I have moral authority. And I am exercising my moral authority to tell all of you that this is what we're doing. And you may recognize a little scent of that from my keynote this morning. That was the moment that I went, this servant leadership thing maybe isn't working for everyone. And that's where the talk actually came from, was that exact experience.
Awesome. All right, so we've got the softball question for the last question. So here it comes. So 2020 has just been a really interesting year, right? We've got an election going on, we've got a pandemic going on, and then in kind of towards somewhere along the way, and for many years prior to, I think we've had this diversity and inclusion movement, and right now with the Black Lives Matter movement as well. How has that impacted the way that you interact with your customers, or the way you as an organization form, or the way that you're listening to the conversations, so forth and so on? How has that had an impact on you in such a crazy, hectic year already? Yeah, I'll just leave it there. Who wants to take their shot?
I'm happy to.
It's a hard one, right? I don't see any hands waving just
Okay.
yet.
Jerry and Marguerite had theirs up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay,
I
Jerry?
think it's
Yeah,
been
yeah, sorry.
quite all right. I think it's been an opportunity for all of us to be introspective. And certainly that has been the result with me. I spend a lot more time thinking about my responses and not necessarily my external responses, but as agilists, we know a great deal about bias, right? Bias in our decision making, and how that can impact an organization. I think that makes us more receptive to the idea that we have biases that we may not be aware of relative to race, color, gender, age. It's certainly, having studies as much as I have about bias and decision making, it's made me a lot more honest with myself so that I can be more introspective about what is now so very important for us as a country, as a people. So I am thinking a whole lot more about it, and hoping that I can be honest with myself when I sense that I'm having a reaction towards someone, whether that's because of any demographic that they may fit in. But I think as agilists and scientists, that we have a responsibility to ourselves to be more acknowledging of the fact that as humans, we carry a lot of biases with us. And anything and everything we can do to be honest and forthright with ourselves to try to work through that. But acknowledging it, I think, is an important first step that certainly I'm taking very seriously.
Awesome. I think I saw Jerry, and thank you for that, Marguerite. I think I saw Jerry next. I kind of missed all the hands going up, so I think I stalled on my internet, so I apologize. Jerry, did you have something to add there as well?
I do. So this is kind of an interesting story. I've been working with a very large organization as the president of a division. And we finally got him to focus on, and you'll hear me refer again to OKRs, but we finally got him to focus on 3 strategic pillars. And these are the things that are really, really important throughout the organization. And I'm not going to call them out just in the off chance somebody from the organization's here. But one of them was specific to the culture of the organization. So we talked all about revenue goals, great. We talked about the organizational effectiveness, great. And I said, all right, so what are you going to do in the third one, which is really applying to the culture and where I'm seeing your organization going? I'm not really going to worry about that one right now because I'm just going to let our HR rep handle that. And I just stopped and I said, let me tell you something. This is important. This is important to your organization. This is important to the culture. This is important to what's going on right now to your people. Do you want to be that president in the meeting whose division is way behind everybody else's because you've not paid attention to it and you've not put metrics to it and you've not made it an important aspect of what you're doing this year? So normally I would have let it kind of slide. Sure, fine, they can do whatever. And I just stopped in my tracks and I said, no, I think this is important enough. And it stopped him and he said, you're right, we're going to need to take a look at this. So I would agree to everything that Marguerite says. I think that we all have to do what we're doing from a very personal standpoint and how we're going to approach this. So a big shift for me was I called out this president and said, sorry, this is important and I think we're going to have to pay attention to it.
Okay, anyone else super passionate about this one? No, I don't see any other hands raising. So I know we're all super passionate about it. I don't want to underscore that. So
I saw Mike had his hand up. Tim, if you have time.
okay, yeah, we'll take time for one last one here. Go for it.
Your cameraman. I'm just kidding. Yes. No, I think it's a tough issue, right? You know, it's like when all this stuff kind of hit the fan, right? It was like this confluence of stuff, right? And I tend to be just kind of a logical, engineering minded, computer science degree kind of guy, right? I think, and I'm like really big on fairness. You know, for me, and so I try to build systems in my organization that are just fair, right? And I try to be blind to everything and just treat everybody like a human being and be really fair. But it forced a response, right? So like I'd met with some members of my team, some diverse members of my team, and crafted a communication and response. I had to get in front of it because it's such a cultural touch point right now that it demands a response from leadership, right? You can't just go on normal. And that kills me, right? I didn't want to have to do it, but you have to step into the moment. And so in response to it in our organization, we created a diversity and inclusion advisory board. We have a program running internally within Leading Agile, because as we've grown, you know, we went from, you know, 0 to about 120 people. It was over 10 years, but I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built. And we have this program called Employee Lifecycle Management that's basically looking at how we onboard and hire and how we support people and educate them and develop them and compensate them and track them and get them good assignments and all these different things, right? Because it's like you have 100 consultants and you've got to figure out how to make that. And one of the things that we had to do is, and what we decided as a team, and with this regard to this diversity inclusion thing, was making sure that while we're looking at employee lifecycle management, like all of the analytics around, are our sourcing channels unbiased? Is our selection channels unbiased? How we do personality assessments and how we evaluate talent, is all that stuff unbiased, right? Are people dropping out of our interview process disproportionately? And I don't think we have problems, but at this stage, when you look at the diversity makeup of our company, you can attribute it to the state of the IT industry, or maybe we have to look at ourselves and see if maybe we're inadvertently selecting people out that shouldn't be selected out. Hope not, right? I hope the data doesn't come back that way. I don't think it will, but I think it forces you to have to really take a look at things, right? And I think you have to respond. And I think this is a moment in time where you don't get to just go, it's not a big deal, right? You got to make it a big deal.
Awesome. Hey, I want to take the time to really thank our panelists today and for all that they've given to the community. You know, those of you that can get in the chat, just give them a quick applause in chat. I know we can't applaud or anything, but I think that was a wonderful open discussion. So thank you all tremendously.